Hello creators and sewers, it's great to have you here. My name's Rebecca, welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to talk to you about creating gifts for readers in your life. I'm going to talk you through creating a book sleeve, and I've been going for it with creating mine. So this year I am teaching a class of 10-year-olds, and we've been really working on loving reading and working on reading skills. So throughout the year I've collected up books and I'm going to give them all a book. But I have also been watching other YouTube creators talk about a gift to November, where in November you make an effort to start making things for the people you love in your life to give them for Christmas. So December is not so harried and you can actually enjoy all the celebrations. I think that is an absolutely terrific idea. Last year I gifted my class books, and I also made them each a little fabric bookmark, which they loved. And I'd been seeing around the place tutorials for book sleeves, a whole lot of different types of book sleeves. And I thought, oh, I wonder if I've got enough scraps to put my own together and how long it would take, because I have a lot to make for a whole class. Well, it turns out it doesn't take that long once you've cut all your bits out to sew up the book sleeve. Probably once you get the hang and you've got all your bits there ready to go, about 15 to 20 minutes. But that does not count for all the cutting out I did. I did batch sew, so I've got all my bits cut out, and then I went through and started sewing them all together. It's not hard because it's all straight stitch. It's all rectangles because I chose to do a book sleeve with a tie, a little bow to tie it up with, which is super cute, but also makes it a little bit easy rather than some other sort of fastening that you have to learn a new skill for. So this is a really great prezi to make if you're a beginner. If you're an advanced sewer, of course you can add lots of extra bits and pieces like pockets on the inside, rickrack or other trim on the outside. But today, for the purpose of this video, I'm going to walk you through step by step how I have put this together. So I have the outside of the book sleeve, I have the fabric for the bow ties, I have fabric for the lining, and I have batting to be sandwiched in between. And it just so happens I already had all those things. I have used fabric that I already had scraps left over from other projects, or things that I have managed to upcycle that I've bought from the op shop, such as doona covers and tablecloths. An example of that is this one here. This is a tablecloth. This one here was a doona cover, and as you can see from this particular colorway I'm showing you, I have mixed and matched all these different fabrics in various ways, so each one is a little bit different. So when I give them to my class, everybody has one that's a little bit unique with their book inside. For this project you can do one, or like me you can do about 31. You will need one piece of fabric or 3 smaller pieces of fabric. This one is 2 different pieces of fabric, the outside, the bow ties and the lining on the inside, and of course a small piece of batting. If you wish to make this book bag or book sleeve either smaller or larger, of course you can do that. I actually watched quite a few YouTube videos myself before I decided on the type of book sleeve with the bow tie. The one I found the most helpful, I'll link below. You might like that YouTube tutorial better, but I changed a few things and decided to put my own together. So her name was the Homemade Homemaker. She did a great job. You will need a sewing machine. I use a really basic, quite dated sewing machine, and it does a tip-top job, so that's okay if you've just got a basic. I did change my needle partway through because the thickness of the fabric made it really hard for a normal universal needle, and I went with a jeans needle because it takes on some really tough thick fabric much better, and that worked for me on my machine, but you adjust for your machine as you need to. The measurements for this outside piece and the wadding and the lining are all the same, so it's really easy to batch cut if you wish, and they are 13 inches by 20 inches. The piece of fabric for the ties was 17 inches by 4.5 inches. On a couple of the book sleeves, I did not have enough fabric, so I made them 3.5 inches wide, or 3 inches, and it still worked just fine, just a little bit of a thinner tie, but that was no problem at all. Use what you've got. So you might like to raid your stash and have a bit of fun putting together particular fabrics. This is one colorway I have put together. So this is my red, white and black colorway, and I've sewn up all these first because I just used black thread, and then I'm going to switch over to some green thread for a different colorway, and then I've got a third colorway to do, because that made it a bit easier and a bit quicker for me. So if I show you some of these, I've got a really cool retro fabric on the outside that I found in an op shop. Inside is just black, and this is an old tablecloth that was still in really good nick, and the tie is the tablecloth as well. Another one over here has the black on the outside. It has a little bit of gingham for the tie, and on the inside we've just got black and white stripes. I'll put in a whole lot more photos at the end. Okay, I hope this is helpful for you. Enjoy the steps. For making the book bag, the book sleeve, I have my fabric cut out ready to go. I did, because I was making a lot, I did a batch cut. So I have my handles, which mostly I cut out in the size 4.5 inches by 17 inches, which is quite generous. For this particular fabric, I didn't quite have enough, so I've got 3.5 inches by 17 inches. This is just a leftover piece of linen from another project, and I've paired it with this piece of vintage fabric I got from an op shop. That is going to be the inside, the lining. The lining, the outside, which matches the handles, and the batting I've all cut at a length of 20 inches and a width of 13 inches. When I had my first try at putting together the batting with the outside fabric, I pinned and I found it moved a lot on the batting because the batting is a little bit stretchy. So then I got some fabric glue and just did a really light spray, and that helped a lot. So that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to do a really light spray on this side, smooth it out, and then do a light spray on the other side. your batting and your fabric have a great discrepancy of length because one has stretched a little bit, don't worry about that. Just give it a little trim. You might even like to wait till you've done your quilting before you give it a little trim just to even it up. I'm now going to take this piece of the outer part of the book sleeve and I'm going to rule lines on the batting so no one else will be able to see my stitch lines, and I'm going to mark them at 2.5 inches in from the side, then 2, then 2, then 2 inches, and it works out nice and evenly across the length of the fabric. So 2.5 inches, and I just make sure one of my lines is square with the top and my 2.5 inches is square with the side. Then I move this across and put the 2 inches on top of that line. And so on. Now I'm going to take this to the machine and just carefully sew straight stitch down each line. I am going to go forwards and backwards at the top and the bottom of each. At the end, if I need to do a little bit of trimming because it's quite uneven, I will, but a little bit of unevenness won't matter because that'll just get hidden away in the seams. This is what the quilted fabric has ended up looking like. As I said, this is a navy blue linen. Now I've got some little pulls here, so I'm just going to iron it, and it's a little bit uneven up the top, so I'll just do a little bit of tidying up there with a cut. These are my 2 pieces of fabric which are going to become the ties at the top of the book sleeve. So they are 17.5 inches. These ones are 3.5 inches. Most of the ones I've made 4.5 inches, just to be a little bit more generous, but I did run out of fabric with these. So I'm going to give them a little bit of a press and then press them in half. If your fabric has much more of a right or a wrong side, when you fold the fabric, the inside part at this stage is the right side and the wrong side would be on the outside. Now I'm going to take this and I'm going to stitch across one end and down the open side, leaving the folded side. because that's obviously already got an edge to it. Oh, I was trying to show you this was the, yes, right, there's our edge, and I'm going to stitch down there and stitch up here, which will leave me one end open with which to turn it through. So when I get towards the edge, my needle goes down, I lift up the foot and I turn my fabric round, then I put my foot back down and continue on, and hopefully my foot is in almost the same position as on this side with the side along the fabric. And we're just doing a straight stitch again, nice and slowly and carefully. And a gentle backwards and forwards at the end so stitches don't come undone. Here are my two thin bits of fabric sewn up. These will make the bows, and here's the opening. Here's the closed end. I'm going to start here and I'm going to take my magical tool, the chopstick, and I'm just going to gently start to work. Open up the fabric a little bit on the inside, and then I'm just gently going to start to work the chopstick through, wiggle the fabric down until I turn it inside out. Great. Let's take the chopstick out, and I'll do it to both. I'm actually going to turn the chopstick around to the smaller end, and just gently, you can see these corners are still inside. I'm just gently going to poke out the corners like this, so it's a little bit neater. I do like using a chopstick because most people have it, but also the end's blunt, so I'm not going to stick a hole into my fabric. So I'll do that with both pieces. Now I want this nice and neat as well as flat, so I'm just going to use my fingers to manipulate the seams so they're right on the edge, and I'm going to iron these. So if your seam's not right on the edge, you kind of just roll it between your fingers, nice and slowly. Great. And there we have our two ties ready to be used. So now I'm going to bring back my outside fabric that we've quilted before, and this line here is the exact middle. I know that because I already measured, and that's how I organized my rows of quilting. Hopefully you can see this. I'm going to take my first tie and match the raw edge up with the raw edge here, pin that down. And then I'm going to do the same to the other side. This is my middle row of stitching. This is the raw edge. This is the raw edge. And hopefully you can see the two are overlapping. Now I'm going to do a little stay stitch. So a stay stitch is just a little stitch close to the edge of the fabric to a little bit in from the seam. That's just going to stop it moving around when you do some further sewing. My row of stitching is done. I did do a little back and forth just to make sure it's not going to come apart. So we now have a little sandwich. We've got our batting, we've got our outside fabric, and we've got our finished bows, handles, whatever you want to call them. Okay, they're the skinnier strips. So I'm going to lap over these bows, and if yours are the bow strips, if yours is a bit longer, just fold it in again. You just want to make sure for these next steps it's not going to get caught up in this seam. So we're going to continue making our sandwich a little bit fatter. So this side here is the outside, the good side of the fabric that you're going to see. This is the outside of the bag, the nice side. On top of this, I'm now going to put the lining, and I'm going to line up this edge and the opposite edge. So I've made a little sandwich, and this is the good side facing in. So both my sides of the fabric that we're not going to see in the end are on the outside. So this is the back of the fabric, this is the back. And I'm just going to pin this down so it's not going to move. And I'm going to come in and do one row of nice neat straight stitch down here, approximately 1 centimetre from the edge. Just the two shorter edges. So I'll turn this around, here we go. Just lining up this short edge, my little sandwich. I'm just making sure I'm not getting the end of the bow tie caught up there. Line it up so it's fairly neat. Again, if there's a little bit of discrepancy between the straightness, not to worry, that's going to be caught up in the seam. No one will see that. Okay, and we're going to sew this little sandwich together with a straight stitch all the way down here. I am going to gently go backwards and forwards at the beginning and at the end, just to make sure it's nice and sturdy and it's not going to come apart easily. That's especially important now we're starting to get some thick layers. Okay, I'm back here at the ironing board. So I've got both short ends sewn. Now I'm going to pull out this top, or this lining fabric, it's at the top at the moment, away from the bottom with the batting. And I'm going to pull these like this and turn it around. So now I have folded it in half, but the opposite manner. So I've got, you can see here, my lining, my outer fabric of my bag, and my wadding. And I want to join together this seam here with this seam here. Now, as I'm looking here, I can see there's a little discrepancy with this. So instead of doing a 1 centimetre margin, a 1 centimetre seam, I'm going to make this a 1.5 centimetre seam to make sure I definitely catch that in and it's really secure. So there's always just simple little things you can do if things don't go exactly to plan. So I'm putting those two seams together, pin it into place. I'm going to pin just a couple of pins across the top here for this wadding side, just so it doesn't shift as I'm sewing. Now, when I come across to this side here, I am going to sew, but only up to about here. I'm going to put my pin in vertically, so I remember I'm not starting from the edge. I'm actually going to start from this pin, and that allows me enough room to then turn this whole thing inside out at the end when I'm done with the sewing. This hole here is at the very bottom of the bag in the lining. I am going to sew it up, but I'm not going to do anything special. I've been using some dark thread, and even though this is white and red, I am going to use the dark thread to quickly fill that hole with the machine. I'll show you how I do it. Basically, it won't be seen at the bottom of the bag unless someone's really curious as to how you've made it and they want to turn it in and out, inside out. Okay, so now I'm going to pin the other side. I'm going to make sure I've matched up these edges. Well, now that I'm looking at this, this is quite a big discrepancy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold that into place, and then I'm actually going to take this to my cutting board, and before I sew, I am just going to actually fix this up a little bit just to make it a bit neater and to make sure my seam is even. Okay, so over this way, I'm going to pin all this in place, and I think I will pin it before I cut it because that way I know the fabric won't be moving. And on this side, I don't need to leave a hole, so I'm going to pin all the way across here, and I will sew all the way across here as well. Okay, I'm just going to neaten this up a little bit so it's more even, and then I'm going to do a straight stitch all the way across, and I'll show you what that looks like. This sandwich of all the wadding and the fabric is now quite thick, so I'm just going to go nice and slowly. This is the reason I put my jeans needle in, because it can handle quite thick fabric, but I'm just going to go slow. I'm just checking that I can feel the bow tie under here. I'm just checking it's not going to get caught in the seam, and it's not. It's okay. Okay, so this is the thickest part of the sandwich, and I'm just going to go nice and slowly. If you've got an older machine, it will probably do the thickness quite well. If your machine is struggling, you can even just turn the handle or the crank to make it go really slowly. Now I'm going to flip it onto this side. This is the side where I'm leaving the gap, so I'm going to start my sewing here. I'm not worried about this little bit of unevenness because it will easily get caught into the seam. Again, I'm going nice and slowly over this section because it's the thickest section. While I'm here with my scissors, I'm going to take some tiny little bits out just to make turning it inside out in the corners a little bit neater. So not staying away from the line of stitching, I'm going to cut off a little triangle at that corner and this corner. Again, definitely not cutting through the stitches. Now this bit here is actually the thickest bit, so I'm going to cut a little triangle from this side and also from this side, because that's going to be the trickiest bit to stitch over with my top stitching. At this stage, we're almost finished. I've got pins ready and my trusty chopstick ready for the very last couple of steps. So here I have my hole where I'm going to gently turn everything through. Just go slowly and gently, it will eventually go through. The wadding part, the quilted fabric, does take a little bit of encouragement, but it will absolutely do it just fine. Here it comes. Here come my bow ties as well as the outside fabric. And there it is. Okay, before I sew the hole shut, I'm going to take my trusty chopstick and gently encourage all the corners to pop out and be a little bit neater. So this is the lining corner. The other one, of course, I haven't sewn shut yet. And we're going to encourage this corner to go out nice and neatly. And the opposite corner, which is the bottom of the bag as well. The bottom of the bag or the book sleeve. There we go. Okay, and the fourth corner is our hole. So I'm just going to give that a little iron. I want the sides to be folded in. See how that raw edge is out? I'm just going to give it a little fold in with my fingers, and then I'll iron that flat. There we go, that's it. Now remember, this is the inside bottom corner. It will not be visible from the outside, and unless someone's looking for it, they won't see it. So I'm going to sew as close as I can, about 1/8 from the edge all the way down to close that hole. And here it is sewn up. If you're really worried about someone seeing that, you can of course change your colored thread. But since I'm batch sewing quite a few, I'm not doing that at the moment. And now I'm going to push through the lining into the center. So it looks pretty good. If you wanted to stop here, you definitely could, but I actually like to do one more step to make sure the lining's going to stay and to make the top look really neat. So I'm going to make sure this edge here has the lining just folded inside rather than folding outside, and I'm going to iron that down so it's not going to move for me. So when I put it on the ironing board, I'm just going to use my fingers to roll it to the inside that little bit. So it's a feature when you look in, but you can't actually see it on the outside of the bag. I think that just gives a neater look. And then I'm just going to move this around until I've ironed the lining in all around the book sleeve. Just give me a gentle tug as I go. Okay, that's all in the right spot. That looks pretty good. I am going to do a line of top stitching all the way around the outside edge. That way I know I've got a really nice finish and my lining's not going to move. That's not essential, but I like to do it. This is another occasion where it's really good to have a needle that can handle some thick fabric, because even though I clipped these inner seams here, it's still quite a bump. So I'm just following this line along here on my foot to stay nice and even for my little top stitching. And as I go, if I see a line breaking through, I'm just going to roll it with my fingers to make sure it goes under. You might notice also I've taken off part of my, oh, what's it called, the tray, the table, so this can easily be manipulated and moved around. Okay, I can see my original line of stitching over here. Now, a lot of machines these days will automatically cut off these threads, but I have a fairly basic old machine which absolutely does the job really well, but does not automatically cut off threads. So before I go back over those, I'm just going to cut those off. Otherwise it might create a little bird's nest there, and I want it to look as neat as possible. Here we have our finished product, a really nice sweet little book sleeve. So it's navy blue on the outside, but inside we've got this really awesome retro check red and white. And even though I had to use a little bit of less fabric on my ties, they still work a treat. So if you are doing this project from start to finish, I think it's about an hour. It's not hard because it's just rectangles and straight sewing, a couple of little extra tools, something to poke things through, an iron and a few pins. I ended up doing a whole batch, so it took me a while to cut all the fabric, and then once I figured out my little shortcuts for my book sleeve, it took me about 15 minutes for each one. Well, I hope that tutorial was really useful for you. I hope the steps were clear, you were able to find the resources that you need, and the tips and tricks helped you a little bit along the way. Feel free to give me a thumbs up, subscribe, let me know how you went with making your book sleeves. I have to admit they are a lot more popular than I thought. Everybody loves a little bit of care put into their package. People love the thought of a homemade gift. It's just that extra little bit special if you have time to put it together. I'm sure my class is going to love these and the rest of the book sleeves that I put together when I hand them over at the end of the year. I'm already looking forward to it. Good luck with your making and with your book sleeves.